This is a bit of a follow-up on the 8032 SK that I'm just temporarily storing for a friend. This thing was completely dead when it was put in a shed more than 20 years ago. It had severe corrosion to the motherboard, multiple chips damaged with legs missing and whatnot. At the time, I didn't know much about electronics. All I had was a soldering iron and a multimeter. So basically, I was absolutely kidding myself if I thought I was ever going to fix that at the time. That didn't stop me having a go, and no surprises, I did not succeed. Here I am, more than 20 years older, much wiser, obviously a lot more disposable income and a lot of tools at my disposal, because electronics are now pretty much a full-time hobby of mine. Yeah, so long story short, this thing's actually working perfectly now, but I will just walk you through what I went through to get this working. And I'm not actually a Commodore expert. This is my first experience with an 8-bit Commodore. But really, it's not rocket science. It's quite easy to work on once you get the hang of it. All of the schematics are available on zimmers.net, but I'm sure anyone that actually owns a pet will already know that. First thing I did after actually powering it on was replacing the mains input filter that's at the back there. This uses a small cylindrical size one just at that power block where the power cable is permanently affixed. That actually grenaded and exploded rubbish all throughout the computer after it being turned on for about 30 seconds. So that was quite frightening. I didn't get far in the diagnostic process before, having the crap scared out of me. So I'll show you what I've done there. But after that was replaced, I then went ahead and built myself a no operation or a NOP generator. I simply scavenged a 6502 out of a spare 1541 floppy drive that I had lying around. The schematics for this extremely simple device are available online as well, if you just look up building your own. I have not damaged this CPU at all. It is in 2 sockets, so all of my dodgy soldering there is actually confined to the sockets themselves. And what this does, quite simply, is basically put a square wave out on all of the address lines, and then you can trace them around on the motherboard and see where they're going and what is causing problems for, where they're actually supposed to be going. The first thing, which is a very common fault, is UE12. That was completely dead. When measuring that, there was deformed waveforms actually going into it. So I can't remember. I think they were held high all the time. And that's what was responsible for doing the select for or the chip select for the ROMs, if I remember correctly. So I had basically no chance of starting whatsoever with this not working. And I ordered probably half a dozen of those because I wasn't sure I'd ever find any ever again. But it seems like they're not that hard to get. I've got heaps of spares. So once I got that working, let me think, what did I do next? Probably easier if I just show you, because there has been so much work going on in here. There is that UE12 that was defective. And because they arrived, I then went ahead and replaced all of the RAM because that was all rusty and basically falling to pieces. I've also recapped this motherboard with the highest quality caps money can buy. The character ROM was also falling to pieces. That had legs falling off it. Kernel ROM was surprisingly okay, but I've replaced it anyway because it was kind of hideously rusted. Edit ROM, that was also rusty and having pins falling off it. 2 of the basic ROMs were okay, but they were rusty, and I've replaced them anyway. This one here was completely dead, but it did have legs fall off it when I removed it. These ones here are just option ROMs. I've just put them on there to mess around with it. That's right. So I got to that point and basically the thing still would not start. And that's when I discovered that there was a bus conflict going on. And I removed the two 6520 PIA chips. They were both dead. I kind of expected the 6522 to be dead as well, but to my surprise, that's actually working. I do have a spare one of those on the way. And that CRT controller, despite being very rusty, actually works fine. For now, I do have a spare of those as well. So yeah, once those two PIAs were removed, and obviously all of the rest of the work was done, it got to the point where it would actually do the boot up chime, but there was still nothing on the display. What I figured out then was the monitor wasn't actually working. There was two open circuit fusible resistors in there. I think that's a fairly common issue as well. I don't know what actually causes that, but yeah, I replaced those and monitor fired up. And then I had garbage on the display. And I'll show you what that was. After a bit of probing around the display circuitry, I ended up discovering it was these 374 series logic chips. Basically, they're completely and utterly dead. They were, again, quite rusty, so that's kind of not surprising. I think this machine was basically just put away a long time ago, even like before we got it. May have been dead at the time, and a lot of damage has occurred to it just by sitting in less than ideal conditions. So as mentioned before, this is where that mains input filter was mounted from the factory. I could not find anything that actually fits in that location anymore that made these days, so I've actually remotely mounted it above the transformer where it's out of the way. And yes, I did have to trim this plastic off the transformer so it would clear these adapters, because these are 2732 EPROMs, not 2532s, which are direct plug-in replacements. Yeah, so I built these adapters. You can get the boards made at PCBWay. That's where I had it done. And I just soldered them up together myself with some sockets and the male machined pins to go into the machined pin sockets that I've put everywhere as well. There were a couple of other failed 74 series logic chips, one there and one there. I can't remember the story there. This has been going on for 6 weeks. It only basically got to completion stage yesterday where it could boot into basic. The final steps were that I was basically scammed from Chinese eBay sellers of these EPROMs. They advertised them as something they were not. So they were advertised as new, old stock Fujitsu branded 2732s. And basically when I was trying to burn them in my programmer, thinking that that's what they were, it was corrupting the image somehow. I mean, it was verifying okay on the burner. I couldn't say anything wrong on the computer, but when I plugged it in here and run the diagnostic firmware, the checksum for every one of these in the adapter board was just constantly changing. I'll show you a clip of that. And I was scratching my head wondering, what have I done wrong? Have I completely screwed this board up? But no. Basically, the final trick was I looked at these under the microscope and I could clearly see that they'd been relabeled, and they're actually Hitachi brand 2732s, 450 nanosecond. And they work fine when you actually tell the frickin' software, the burner software, what they are. So I told it that they're Hitachi 2732s, or 46 2732 to be more precise. Burnt it and worked perfectly. That was it. So you just got to be careful with these Chinese eBay sellers, especially when they're claiming to sell you new things, because they were actually all used. They still had data on them. I had to erase them as well. So scammed twice over, not what they're supposed to be, plus not new, and I paid a premium for them. But I don't care. At the end of the day, at least they work. The other thing I got scammed on is I bought an allegedly new MOS CPU. It wasn't even a CPU. I don't even know what it was because it was completely and utterly useless. So I threw it in the bin, and I bought the, I think that's Signetic brand, SYU6502A. I have no desire to use MOS branded ICs because they're not exactly reliable. That's why I've not bothered getting anything MOS branded. Even for the PIA, I've used the UMC brand, I think it is. And I still have one to put here, but I just want to check the IEEE 488 stuff before I risk one of those, because I think they were $25 each, those chips. So I just want to check that before I plug it in. And I don't actually have anything to plug in there. This modification was not done by us. This was the first owners. Obviously, they didn't want to use that Centronics style connector. They wanted to use a card edge connector. God knows why, because, well, that's rarer these days, but maybe back then it was easy to come by. Nowadays, these Centronics kind of connectors, they're a dime a dozen, like $30. You buy as many as you like on eBay. They're still made today. That's enough of me waffling. I'll go ahead and show you the thing working now. One other thing I've done this morning is I've actually replaced the DB25 connector on the keyboard cable and in the machine because they were both rusty. When you're dealing with a 40-year-old keyboard that's not the best at the best of times, you don't want increased resistance from rusty DB25s because that was making a bad situation worse. I have serviced this keyboard. All of the keys work. They did not originally. Basically, none of them worked. And I've used Electrolube brand rubber roller restorer on all of the carbon contacts. It basically wipes away all of the oxidized rubber, leaving fresh stuff there, and it makes the rubber look absolutely brand new, and the keyboard works like new. I don't know how long that will last, probably till the next layer of rubber becomes oxidized and eventually there'll be none left and then it becomes useless. So hopefully someone makes a replacement keyboard PCB for these to use decent mechanical switches, because that would be freaking awesome. This keyboard sucks, although I like the sound of it. It does work. I'll show you now. I've just started up now and you can hear that famous tone. And yeah, I'm shooting this on a phone, so I can't adjust the frame rate, so flicker is going to be visible. Just load this not very exciting program that I wrote this morning that I've saved on a cassette. I'm not the author of it. I just went randomly searching for Pet basic programs to type in just to test out the keyboard that I'd refurbished. And this was quite reasonable as a test. I'll list it out and show you. I have not refurbished this cassette mechanism. It's kind of crappy, so I'm surprised it's even working. Let's see if this actually runs still. It's just a mathematical thing. You can really give this a test as the world's most expensive calculator. Let's give it 25 digits to work to, and we'll start at 2. And then it will list all of the powers of 2, up to 25 digits. How very, very exciting. You can see that's taxing its little 1 megahertz CPU quite intensively. I'm sure it could be more efficient if this was written in machine language, but yeah, it's in BASIC, so it's extremely inefficient. But anyway, that's working. I do have some other stuff on the way to make this do things a little bit more exciting, so probably next time it's demonstrated it'll be doing more than just sitting at a basic ready prompt. I really had nothing to show yesterday when I was showing this thing off because it was still dead up until this morning. That's how close it came. I was still working on it yesterday morning. Yeah. And once that gets up to 25 characters, it should actually stop. Eventually, any day now. Hey, it's calculating things a lot faster than a human could ever do, so even though it's 40 years old, it's still mathematically way more efficient than my 40-year-old brain, so it's not doing a bad job. Pocket calculator, I'm pretty sure couldn't even calculate to that many digits, so that's pretty impressive. Just get out of that. Out of interest, I'll show you the option ROMs. They're not that exciting, they're just 2 enhancements to BASIC. The one in the 9000 slot is for Waterloo University. They've got a slightly modified version of BASIC. It's only a 2 kilobyte ROM. And the other one in the A1000 slot is, I cannot remember, it's Power Basic, and that's a 4 kilobyte ROM. I burnt that on my last 2732. I have got some more coming because I've ordered way too much of everything. So I might play with some other options as well when that comes in. And I do have a tape emulator coming, so I'll be able to try a little bit more exciting software that I can download offline and see it working, doing a bit more than a few calculations. I'll just show you one of the option ROMs, Power Basic, because there's 2 of basically very similar things. I don't know if that's normal behavior, but to switch between the 2, I have to turn the machine off and on again. You can't just load one option ROM and then immediately go load another one. It doesn't work. You have to do it from a clean start. So to start that Power Basic ROM, which I've got in the A1000 slot, it's SYS 40960, if I remember. Got to actually type it correctly. I don't know if it needs the space. I'm no pet expert. And there we go, it has loaded that Power Basic. I haven't read up on it. I don't even know what the difference is. It might have a few additional capabilities, I would assume so. Otherwise, why would you bother installing it? And anyway, that's just showing that that's working. And what the hell, I'll show you the other one as well. And to access this other option ROM that I've installed in the 9000 slot, well, it's a clean reboot now, because as I said, you've got to not load one and then immediately load the other one. This one is SYS 36864, and this is the Waterloo University Structured Basic. Copyright 27th of the 4th, 1980. This is only a 2 kilobyte ROM, so I can't imagine it does much. It probably just modifies the standard BASIC a little bit. I didn't see any documentation on this, so I really don't know what it actually does. I presume this was for students at the Waterloo University back in 1980. They probably had a number of pets and used these for learning basic programming, which would have been really cool. So it'd be interesting if any of those students are around these days. They'd only be 20 years older than me. So they'd be in their 60s. So surely they'd still be around and they'd have fond memories of using these pets to get their university education, and no doubt highly successful careers, although they would have had to have moved on to something else because Commodore Pets were not around for much longer after that. Anyway, that's the end of this video. So just showing that this thing is actually working in full now. I would like to get the missing badge for the front of it and these missing keycaps, the 0, this slash, and I can't remember what that one is because I don't think I've used it yet. Oh, that's a cursor movement one. Yeah, that's right. That's left and right. Yeah, anyway, if anyone has those, shout out to me.